He carried that old man's groceries every Tuesday, never filmed it, never told anyone. No one offered to help, no one cared. Then, one day, the veteran didn't show up, and the flag outside the store was lowered to half-mast. Who was he? Why? Did a grocery clerk care so much? And why did this simple act start something no one saw coming? Welcome to True Quiet Stories. Let's find out what really happened in this story. The Belmart on 3rd and Oak wasn't the kind of place anyone would describe as special. It had sticky tiles in the frozen section, one automatic door that always stuck halfway, and a security mirror that squeaked whenever the wind from the HVAC kicked up just right. But it was open late, the shelves were stocked, and people knew. The faces behind the counters, that's where Eli Hernandez worked. 19, thin, faded blue polo tucked into khakis. One semester into community college and already wondering if he should switch majors. He worked the afternoon shift Tuesday through Saturday, mostly on register duty and bagging. Not glamorous, but consistent. He liked consistent, that's probably why he noticed Mr. Harper before anyone else did. Mr. Harper came every Tuesday, every single one, never early, never late. Always around 4:10 p.m., right before the rush. Walking with a slight hunch, a cane and a camouflage jacket that looked older than Eli's mother. His face was hard to read, lines deep around the mouth, a thick brow that cast his eyes in shadow, and lips that never smiled but didn't frown either. His presence was steady, intentional. He bought the same things each week: canned peaches, canned green beans, peanut butter, a loaf of rye bread, a small pack of batteries, dog food, though no one ever saw him with a dog, milk, instant coffee, never more than 2 bags worth, always cash, always exact. The receipt read L. Harper, but he never offered his first name, and Eli never asked. At first, it was just a casual gesture. Eli saw him struggling to lift a basket, stepped in, carried it to the belt. Next week, Harper nodded toward him when he entered, like he expected it. By the 3rd week, it was routine. There was something in the way Harper moved that made Eli slow down, not just physically, but mentally. The world buzzed around them, customers huffing at the prices, carts squeaking, managers on walkie-talkies. But Harper, he walked like none of it mattered, like he wasn't part of this version of the world. Eli never asked questions, just did the job. When Harper finished paying, Eli would bag his groceries with more care than he did for anyone else, walk him to the bench outside the store, and wait beside him until a taxi pulled up. Always the same yellow cab, always the same driver, who nodded but never spoke. Harper would nod once at Eli before climbing in, holding his 2 bags like they were more than just groceries. Then he'd disappear down 3rd Street, every Tuesday. Dyke went on like that for 7 months. Eli learned to expect the silence, the routine, the way Harper would sometimes grunt instead of saying thank you, and how that grunt meant more than most people's entire sentences. But slowly, tiny pieces of Harper's past began to leak through. One time, when Eli reached for the bags too fast, Harper said, "Careful, son. These knees held up under mortar fire, but they won't handle your enthusiasm." Another day, Harper paused at the coffee aisle and muttered, "Smelled better when it came in metal tins. Everything had weight back then." And once, just once, when they passed a father yelling at his kid in the parking lot, Harper whispered, "They used to scream like that when the helicopters left us." Eli said nothing, but that was the moment he realized Harper wasn't just a veteran. He was still carrying things heavier than bags. One Tuesday it was pouring rain, the kind that makes the sidewalks hiss and turns plastic bags into water. Balloons. Eli assumed Harper would skip it. But at 4:10 p.m., the door creaked open, and there he was, soaked, coat buttoned to the throat, cane tapping against the tile. Eli grabbed the mop and stepped forward. "You didn't have to come out in this," he said, taking Harper's basket. Harper looked at him. Water dripped from his brow. "I never missed a Tuesday in '68, he said. "I'm not starting now." Eli didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and carried on. Some employees joked about it. One cashier said, "Eli's got a soft spot for his army boyfriend." Eli laughed it off. He never corrected them, but inside he felt something. Else, something closer to reverence. Because Harper didn't demand attention, didn't wear his service like a badge, didn't ask for anything but a few cans of peaches and someone who didn't treat him like an inconvenience. Eli wasn't doing charity. He was keeping rhythm. The week before Christmas, Harper handed Eli a small box wrapped in newspaper. No ribbon. No card. "What's this?" Harper didn't answer, just nodded once. Eli opened it later that night. Inside was a silver keychain engraved with the words, "Show up every week. That's enough." He never told anyone about it, but he kept it on his belt loop from that day on. Then, one Tuesday, Harper didn't come. Eli thought maybe it was the cold. February had hit hard. Icy roads, wind strong enough to peel signs off light posts. Maybe the cab company shut down for the day. He waited anyway. No cab pulled in, no cane tapped against tile, no peaches, no bread, no Harper. The next Tuesday came. Still nothing. Eli asked the other clerks if anyone had seen him. No one had. He asked the cab company, but didn't know Harper's address. Just that he always got dropped off and picked up at the same spot. They said they couldn't give out details without a client name. He searched online for L. Harper and Vietnam veteran and 3rd Street, but came up blank. It felt ridiculous. Trying to find someone with only a last initial and a bag of groceries as context, but he kept waiting. On the 3rd Tuesday, just before his shift started, Eli stepped out front to bring in the cart rack. He stopped short. The American flag that hung beside the entrance, the one most people ignored, faded from sun and weather, had been lowered, half-mast, no city order, no holiday, just lowered. No one at the store could say who did it, but Eli stood there, one hand on the cart handle, heart suddenly pounding. He didn't cry, but something cracked. Not loudly, just enough to let in the cold. He walked back inside, not speaking to anyone, and that evening, after closing, he returned to the bench out front, sat in Harper's usual spot, 2 plastic bags in his hands, one with a loaf of rye bread and canned green beans, the other with milk and peanut butter. He sat there in the dark for 20 minutes. The taxi never came, and for the first time in months, Eli didn't know what to do next, but he stayed because someone had to. Eli sat on the bench for nearly half an hour. It was cold, his fingers red, the bags in his hands slowly growing heavier, not because of weight, but meaning. The wind rattled the corner sign, and the flag above him barely moved, like even it knew to stay still. He didn't know why he brought the groceries out. Maybe it was to fill the space. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was because it felt wrong to let the bench sit empty. This wasn't just where Harper rested before his cab. It was where he existed, where Eli had learned to see him, really see him, and now it was just vacant. That night Eli couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling in the dark, mind running loops through every Tuesday for the past year. He remembered Harper's walk, slow but steady, the quiet way he'd tap the cane 3 times before sitting, how he never rushed through the aisles, even when people behind him grew impatient. He thought of that box, the keychain, "Show up, every week, that's enough." It echoed now in a way Eli wasn't ready for. He hadn't expected Harper to stop showing up. Somehow he had started believing the routine made the man invincible. That showing up was armor, and now that armor was gone. The next morning, when Eli arrived at the store, there was an envelope taped to the employee door. No stamp, no name, just his own. Eli. He opened it carefully. Inside was a folded note and a photo. The note read, "He told me once that if he ever stopped coming, I should give this to you. Said you'd know why. Lenny, yellow cab, dear 4." Eli unfolded the photo. It was black and white, faded. A young Harper, barely 20, stood beside a battered military truck. He wore fatigues, sleeves rolled, helmet under one arm. His other hand held a can of peaches. The back was labeled L. Harper. Da Nang, 68. Real courage doesn't shout. Eli swallowed hard. He didn't cry, but he held that photo like it might disappear if he blinked. That day at work, everything felt different. Customers still came and went. The scanner beeped. Kids screamed in aisle 9. But Eli couldn't stop glancing at the entrance, expecting, hoping, to see that camo jacket again, the veteran hat, the slow walk toward the produce. It never came. Instead, sometime near 5 p.m., a man approached the bench outside. He wasn't wearing a uniform, but Eli noticed the posture, the gait, the way he took off his cap as he stood beside the flagpole, eyes fixed upward. Eli stepped outside. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Did you know Mr. Harper?" The man looked over. "I served with him. Long time ago." Eli nodded. "I think he left that for me." He held up the photo. The man studied it, then smiled. Barely. "Yep, that was Harper. Didn't talk much. But when he did, you listened." He reached into his coat and handed Eli a small circular coin. "A challenge coin, Marine Corps, weathered, real. I carry 2. He gave me this one back in '79. Said I should pass it on someday. Looks like today's the day." He placed it in Eli's palm and walked away. Eli didn't even get his name. That night, Eli started a box. Inside, he placed the photo, the challenge coin, the original receipt from Harper's last visit, dated exactly 3 Tuesdays ago, and the note from the cab driver. He didn't know what to call the box. It wasn't a shrine. It wasn't about grief. It was something else, something sacred. Later that week, the manager approached Eli during his shift. Someone called from the city, said they saw the flag, asked if something official happened. Eli hesitated. No, not official, just important. The manager nodded slowly. "You thinking of doing something more permanent?" Eli hadn't thought about that. But that night, sitting on his bed with the box beside him, he stared at the quote Harper had engraved. "Show up. Every week. That's enough." And he wondered, what does it mean to keep showing up when the person is no longer there? The next day, he brought a small frame to work. Nothing fancy. Just a quote typed in black letters on white paper. He came every Tuesday. Rain or shine. Bought peaches. Taught me to show up. And when he stopped coming, the world got a little quieter. He placed it under the flagpole beside the bench. Didn't ask permission. Didn't make a post. Just placed it and walked back inside. By the end of the week, someone had left a small American flag stuck into the dirt beside the bench. The day after that, a child's drawing of a man in a veteran's cap holding a grocery bag. And then, coins, medals, notes. It wasn't fast. It wasn't viral. It was quiet, but it grew, one small act at a time. A reporter from the local paper showed up the following Tuesday. Not a big camera crew, just a notebook and a phone. She asked to speak to Eli. "I don't have much to say," he told her. She smiled. "That's exactly why I want to hear from you." He gave her 10 minutes, told her about Harper, the groceries, the bench, the flag, the box. She wrote an article titled, "A Boy, a Bench, and a Veteran Who Showed Up." It ran on the front page of the community section. No comments allowed, no sponsor ads, just the story. The day after the article published, a woman came to the store with tears in her eyes. "My father never got this," she said, placing a small bronze pin on the bench. "He came home and nobody even said, 'Welcome back.' But this? This feels like someone's finally saying it." Eli stood beside her silently. He didn't have a speech, just presence. By now, people knew, not in a national way, but in a neighborhood way. The bench had become a place to pause, to honor, to remember not just Harper, but all the Harpers who walked in and out of stores, unnoticed, who carried war in their bones and silence in their steps. And Eli? He kept doing what he'd always done. He bagged groceries, he swept the front, and every Tuesday at 4:10 p., He stepped outside with a can of peaches and sat for 5 minutes on the bench, just in case someone needed the seat warm. A month after Harper stopped coming, the tribute bench out front of Belmart had changed. Not structurally, not officially, but something about it felt different now. The small frame Eli had placed with his handwritten quote had been laminated by someone, maybe a manager, maybe a stranger, and reattached with zip ties. The American flag on the pole no longer drooped. Someone had replaced it. New, clean, strong. The offerings had multiplied. There were now 3 challenge coins, a bronze star ribbon, a pair of old dog tags, and a faded black and white photo of 3 men in uniform crouching behind sandbags. A sticky note beneath it simply read, "One of them made it home. He shopped here." Eli didn't touch the items. He just kept them safe. Every Tuesday, he kept his routine, stocked shelves, ran the register. And at 4:10 p.m. sharp, he stepped outside with a can of peaches in his hand, sat on the bench, and looked out at the parking lot. He never said a word. But it was clear to anyone watching. This time was spoken for. One Tuesday, a man in a Veterans of Foreign Wars VFW jacket stood silently behind Eli as he sat. After a minute, he reached over and set something on the bench, a small embroidered patch from the 173rd Airborne Brigade. "He wouldn't want me to talk your ear off," the man said. Eli nodded. "I just wanted to be here." The man walked off. That was how it usually went now. Belmart's manager finally stepped in. "You know this bench has become something, right?" she asked one morning while Eli was stocking the cereal aisle. He nodded. "Yeah, I guess so." She tilted her head. "We're getting calls, emails. A school even asked if they could bring students to see the tribute. This is turning into a community thing." "I'm not trying to make it into a museum." "I know," she said. "That's what makes it work." Then she added, "But if we're going to keep it, we should make it last." By the following week, a carpenter from the neighborhood, a quiet man named Doug, who rarely said more than 2 words when buying nails, volunteered to reinforce the bench. He added a second layer of support under the seat, sanded it smooth, and sealed it with weatherproof coating. He didn't charge a dime. He just came by, did the work, and left behind a small engraving on the side rail. Some people don't need to speak to be remembered. That same week, a veteran from out of state stopped by. He had driven over 2 hours just to see it. "My buddy told me about the article," he said. "I didn't know Harper, but I knew a dozen like him." He stood there for a while, then took a small envelope from his coat. "I wrote a letter to someone I served with. Never mailed it. Figured this is the best place for it now." He slid it under the frame and walked away. Eli didn't move. He just watched the paper flutter slightly in the breeze and settle beneath the laminated quote. Soon, the bench became more than a tribute to Harper. It became a mirror, reflecting stories people hadn't told in years. Every week, Eli heard snippets. "My dad used to sit like this, just thinking. I always wondered if anyone remembered my uncle. He came back, but he never came home." People didn't need long conversations. They just needed a place to feel, and Eli kept showing up. That month, the local city council reached out to Belmart. They asked for permission to recognize the tribute as an unofficial civic point of remembrance. Eli didn't really know what that meant, but when they offered to add a discreet bronze plaque to the site, he said only one thing: "Don't make it about me." They agreed. The plaque arrived 2 weeks later. It read, "For those who returned quietly and those who sat quietly beside them. Community Remembrance Bench 2024. After the plaque went up, local veterans groups began gathering near the bench on Tuesday afternoons. Not formal ceremonies, just presence. One Tuesday, 6 men from different branches sat on folding chairs nearby. They didn't speak for almost an hour. One smoked a cigarette. Another closed his eyes and leaned back, soaking in the sun. Before they left, they placed a folded American flag on the bench. Attached was a note, "For L.H." and the kid who waited. Eli placed it in the box that night, the one he kept. In his room, It now contained 5 challenge coins, 2 military patches, 3 handwritten letters, a folded veteran's cap, and that original keychain, "Show up every week, that's enough." The following week, a woman walked into Belmart with a tray of cookies and handed them to Eli. "These are from my dad. He won't come here himself, but he asked me to say thank you." "For what?" Eli asked, puzzled. She smiled. "For remembering someone like him." That night Eli stood by the bench under the streetlight. The store had closed. The sidewalk was empty. He sat down slowly and looked up at the flag. The sky was clear, stars visible between the light posts. The sound of distant cars hummed like ocean waves. He thought about Harper, not just the way he walked or the groceries he bought, but what he stood for. Quiet presence, discipline, routine. Eli understood now. Harper wasn't trying to be remembered. He was just trying to exist with dignity, and somehow that had become unforgettable. Word of the tribute reached a local university. Professor in the sociology department contacted Eli through the store and asked if she could document the story as part of a research project on community healing through organic remembrance. Eli declined the interview, but he sent her one sentence via email. "People didn't show up because I built something. They showed up because someone was finally seen." By the end of spring, the bench had received over 700 individual visits. A small article was published in a national veterans magazine. People from across the state sent letters, old medals, even framed commendations. One came with a note. "I was buried in paper, never had a grave. This bench feels like mine." Eli read that one twice, then placed it under the frame with care. Then, one afternoon, the unexpected happened. A plain black SUV pulled into the parking lot. 2 men stepped out, both in dress uniform, one from the U.S. Army, the other from the Department of Veterans Affairs. They walked straight toward Eli as he stood near the entrance. "Mr. Hernandez?" One said, "Yes, we'd like a moment." They didn't speak long, just explained that the VA was requesting permission to present Eli with a civilian recognition citation for veteran support, one of the few given each year. "It's not because of a grand act," one of them said. "It's because you reminded people what quiet loyalty looks like." Eli didn't know what to say. He wasn't trying to be honored. He was just keeping someone from being forgotten. But he nodded, accepted their handshake, and thanked them with a voice that cracked just a little. That night he placed the certificate in the box, didn't frame it, didn't post it, just folded it beside the others and sat in silence. The box now felt like a small museum no one would ever visit, and that was okay, because the stories it held didn't need applause. They just needed someone to carry them forward. Summer came slowly. The trees along 3rd and Oak thickened with green, and the sunlight stretched longer across the pavement. The tribute bench in front of Belmart stood in the same place it always had, but something about the air around it felt quieter now, not because fewer people came, but because the ones who did came with purpose. The noise had faded. The story hadn't. On the first Tuesday of June, Eli arrived earlier than usual. It wasn't his shift. He didn't even clock in. He just came, sat on the bench, and waited. No groceries. In hand. No plan. Just presence. He watched as the sun lit the top of the flag. The plaque on the side of the bench glinted slightly. Across the street, the coffee shop opened. A mother pushed a stroller past the sidewalk. Life moved forward, but Harper still had a seat and Eli still kept it warm. That day, a man sat beside him, older, gray beard, hands rough. He didn't say hello, just lowered himself slowly onto the bench and sat in silence. After a moment, he said, "I never met him, but I feel like I have." Eli nodded. "Same," the man chuckled. "My son told me this bench is in a YouTube video, said it's famous now." Eli smiled faintly. "I guess quiet things don't stay quiet forever." The man looked down at the plaque. "Read it," then reached into his jacket and pulled out a photo, wrinkled at the corners, creased down the middle. A group of soldiers in a jungle, standing in the rain. One of them had his arm around the shoulders of someone who looked like Harper. The man set it gently between them on the bench and stood. That's me, 1970. If he's who I think he is, he stood up for me once. Guess this is me standing back. He walked away. Eli stared at the photo for a long time, then folded it once, carefully, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Weeks later, Belmart's manager surprised Eli during his shift. "Hey," she said, holding a tablet. "The mayor's office is organizing a small civic dedication. They want to call the sidewalk area in front of the store Quiet Watch Plaza." Eli raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot." "It's optional," she said. "But it's already moving forward with community support." Eli took a breath. He didn't love attention, didn't do any of this to be seen, but part of him understood. This was no longer about him or even Harper alone. It was about the people who came after, those who still needed somewhere to feel seen. He nodded once. "Let them do it. Just keep it simple." The plaque was replaced, this time larger, bronze, permanently affixed into the sidewalk just below the flagpole. It read, "Quiet Watch Plaza, in memory of those who walked beside us without applause, and those who sat beside them so they wouldn't be alone. Dedicated to L. Harper and all who show up without needing to be asked." Below that, in smaller text, "Inspired by a grocery clerk who helped carry something far heavier than bags." The dedication took place on a Sunday afternoon. There were no fireworks, no cameras, just a small folding table with water, 24 chairs, and a podium. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder. Children sat cross-legged in front. Eli stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching. The mayor spoke briefly. A teacher who brought her students every year read a few words. A retired colonel who had never met Harper read aloud a poem titled "The Tuesday Man," and then silence. For a full 60 seconds no one moved, not a breath, not a whisper, just the sound of birds in the trees and the wind brushing against the flag. That silence said more than any speech ever could. After the dedication, people came. Up to Eli, shaking his hand, thanking him, telling him stories. "I was a bagger once, too. My brother served in Korea. I wish someone had noticed him. I told my grandson about this," he cried. One woman simply hugged him and said, "You gave my father a place to rest, even if it wasn't for him directly." Eli smiled, nodded, and said very little. He didn't need to. At home, the box in his closet had grown. Inside now were 8 challenge coins, 4 letters from strangers, 3 veteran patches, 2 framed photos, 1 folded flag, a child's crayon drawing of the tribute bench, and Harper's original keychain. It wasn't a box of grief. It was a box of weight, carried willingly. One night, Eli sat with his mother at the kitchen table. She held a letter that had arrived in the mail. From the Department of Veteran Affairs, they were offering him a position as a community outreach liaison, part-time, to help support young people in veteran awareness programs across schools in the region. He read it slowly. His mom watched him with tears in her eyes. "You changed things," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to. That's why it mattered." He smiled. "I just helped him carry his groceries." The next morning, he returned to the bench, alone. He sat with his hands in his lap, watching the street wake up. After a few minutes, he pulled the photo from his jacket, the one the old soldier had left, and placed it carefully under the frame. Then he whispered, "I still see you here." And he meant every word. Years later, long after Eli moved on from Belmart, Quiet Watch Plaza still remained. The bench was maintained by volunteers. The tribute wall grew slowly, not cluttered, just added to with care, and every Tuesday, without fail, someone sat there, sometimes a veteran, sometimes a child, sometimes a stranger who had heard the story and came just to feel it for themselves. Eli returned one day. He was older, wiser, still quiet. He brought a bag of groceries, sat on the bench, and placed a single can of peaches beside him. A few minutes later, a boy around 11 approached. "Hey, is this where that guy used to sit?" Eli smiled. "Yeah, it is." The boy nodded. "My grandpa told me about it, said someone helped him once too. I think that person was like you." Eli looked down at the can, then back at the boy. "Maybe one day," he said, "you'll help someone too." The boy smiled wide. "I will." He ran off, and Eli stayed just a few more minutes, because sometimes the most unforgettable stories begin with someone who simply refuses to let another person feel invisible. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share in the comments a story that deserves to be heard, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell. We post powerful news stories here every single day, because in a world full of noise, quiet actions still speak the loudest.